Welcome to another Coffee with Alissa video where we answer your questions. Today we're going to focus on a not so often discussed topic, financial planning for blended families. 40% of families in the US are blended, with at least one partner having a child from a previous relationship. Every situation is different, and there's 67 possible step-family combinations. There are certainly enough struggles and tensions in blended families as there is, but money does not have to be one of them. So to start out, I want to introduce Kyle Zeller from our Retirement Solutions Group. Kyle and I are both members of Step Families, so we wanted to do a video sharing some of the things that we have learned over the years. How are you today, Kyle?
I'm great. How are you, Alissa? Thanks for having me.
Good, I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me. So before we dive into the specifics of money, I'd like to share some important lessons learned. At first, you might wonder how they relate to financial planning, but we will certainly share how they do. The first thing is communication and setting realistic expectations. Do this early on, arguably before you get married, and that is really imperative for success. In a book that I read, it talks about cooking appliances and how blended families can relate to those. And I think many of us jump in with a lot of gusto, and it's good intentions, but we kind of throw everyone in this new family into a blender. And a blender, it chops up ingredients. It tries to mix everybody together really quickly. And what happens is every ingredient ends up losing its distinct flavor because it's quickly blended with everybody else. But a crock pot, on the other hand, takes all of the individual ingredients, and over 7 to 8 hours, which could equate to 7 to 8 years, the ingredients slowly soften and they merge together. They maintain their individuality, but they create a beautifully merged recipe. And so the second thing that I want to bring up for lessons learned is togetherness. The divorce rate for second marriages is significantly higher than first marriages. And I think a lot of this comes from not understanding the loss that has happened to everyone involved. Not just loss experienced by the adults and children because of divorce or death, but even the losses experienced by the new spouses and step-parents. It's really important to recognize what those are because they drive behavior, including financial behavior. I think as humans too, we have this innate desire to be known and understood. And so getting and staying on the same page with each other, understanding what's important to each other, setting a standard and boundaries together for your home, it really helps to soften those losses and bring a family together. And I think whether it's finances or just step families in general, blood is naturally thicker than water. It's really easy to trend towards what's comfortable. So maybe that's clinging to your kids versus diving into the unknown water, clinging to your new spouse. Just because you might not know what the reaction to tough conversations might be. And financial conversations can certainly be tough, whether you're in a traditional family or a step family. But it's incredibly important, I think, for the success of a remarriage and a step family that the couple's on the same page. You're committed to marriage first. And that doesn't mean you disregard your children. It just means that you set a standard in your home, that you and your new spouse are leading it together, and that your marriage is truly a healthy foundation for a healthy family. And if you're worried about the kids' reactions, they are going to push back like they do with everything, but they'll work through it and it will benefit them. So let's take these lessons and tie them back to financial planning. And financial planning and estate planning, like I said before, they're difficult enough to discuss in a first marriage or traditional family, let alone adding in these other factors. So Kyle, we talked about, spending time with your new spouse, again, hopefully before marriage, to really get to know them and also get to know them financially. So what does this mean?
Yeah, so I look at it as when you say before marriage, that is extremely important. And you go through things, was there debt incurred? Who has ownership of the house? And if that were to be sold, you kind of take a look at budgets as a whole and what kind of expenses do they have versus me as the new spouse, my situation, and making sure you're having those kind of deeper conversations to get a feel where both of you are. Are you saving for retirement? Do you have life insurance? What kind of debt do you have? And let's look at budgets overall and how you've been affected by a divorce and what that's done to you financially. And those conversations, if handled right can be more comfortable than uncomfortable, so to speak.
Absolutely. So what other factors are there that we could consider?
Well, I think what comes into play too, I never looked at it as it's the child's fault to be where we are, so to speak. And but you look at things like guardianship, you look at establishing beneficiaries, you look at do we need to set up a trust so we can kind of control. And one of the things I really think is important is factoring in, as you do get married, if you do plan on having more kids, if something were to happen to mom and dad at the same time, what does that look like? Nobody likes to think kind of that far because it's a grim situation. But if you have a younger child versus somebody who's 18, 19, 20 years old, what does that look like big picture wise? And are you taking the steps necessary to kind of speak from the grave, so to speak?
Absolutely. And I think too, to add to that, really understanding your state's rules on everything are important too, like rules on alimony, child support, even on FAFSA. I think every state kind of applies things differently. So that's really important. So once you sit down, you set these goals and expectations together, I think financial planning is a really good resource to kind of help you draw out that roadmap to reach these goals together. So I think I would suggest look at your cash flow, all your sources of income, what's going out the door spending wise, what are you saving, what are you investing? And from there, you create a budget of your inflows and your outflows. And so you can see what's left over, what are we truly saving and spending? And then set some ground rules. Right? I think that setting some ground rules early on can eliminate a lot of discord when it comes to financial disagreements. I know my husband and I each have a separate little allowance account, and because we like to spend on different things. So we each get a certain amount of money in that account every month, and can't really say anything about the others. And I think it really works well because it gives us both freedom in our spending to do the things that we want. And the third thing I would say throughout the whole financial planning process is just to celebrate your wins, whether they're big wins or tiny wins. I think that really goes a long way. So let's move back over. You mentioned some items in the realm of estate planning. It's a conversation I think that a lot of people want to avoid, but it's really extra important in this situation. So Kyle, what estate planning topics are kind of top of mind for step families?
Yeah, so I look at it saying, let's look at your stage of life that you're in. How old are the children? In my example, we have a 20-year-old, we have a 15-year-old, and an 8-year-old. Well, they're at different stages of life, and unfortunately, if something were to happen to us both, somebody has to have guardianship over our 8-year-old, which is a heavy financial burden. And that's where I love to look at things like life insurance, inheritance, and so forth. But also with our 20-year-old, she's a typical 20-year-old, smart and on her way in life. But do we want her to inherit, six figures and that kind of stuff and be in totally charge of that on her own? So those are the things that we need to have that I think are important, and to look at how they would each be affected if something were to happen to us both.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned in the beginning, every step family has very different situations, needs, and goals. So consulting a financial advisor who believes in comprehensive financial planning is very key in this process. That advisor can bring clarity, ask important questions, and help you set realistic expectations. And they can also help you take emotions off the table, which is really helpful in coming up with that plan. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us. And I'm going to include some book links that I've found helpful, and I hope that you find them helpful as well. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.